I personally always recommend release forms when it comes to a documentary, but there's a lot more to consider when it comes to ethics and privacy. So let's talk film. Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lauren, the film student extraordinaire, batching these videos because we're back in school. In today's video, I'll be talking about documentary ethics and privacy concern. This is a strong value point for me, so that's why I'm going to be sharing it with you, because I think it is really important to make sure everybody is being considerate of their subjects and not exploiting them for their own personal gains. So I'm going to start with a question to get you guys thinking, and the answer I think is obvious, but it may not be obvious to everyone else, and it's my answer, but that doesn't mean it's your answer. So the question is, would the truest representation of the facts be obtained by stringing all the footage together, or is some shaping necessary? I believe that as soon as shaping begins, then ethical concerns and questions arise. Because once you start altering the footage from the natural events, you might be thinking, oh, well, I'm just cutting down this unnecessary moments. But that might not be unnecessary if it comes to portraying a character who's probably actually a regular person, because it's a documentary, as they actually were. Like, maybe you cutting out that pause makes their answers seem more blunt and abrasive when in fact they were actually considered over and pondered. You don't know how your shaping of the events will impact future audiences. That's what I believe. The editing of documentary footage often leads to distortion of the events that they were documenting. And this editorial purpose can often supersede the raw material in ways that may not be representative of the people involved, but it may tell more of a story, which might be why the editors were going for that in the first place. You might be wondering, well, what do you mean documentaries going towards a certain story? Aren't documentaries supposed to just capture things as they are and they don't have any other goal than that? Well, that's not true, because even documentaries are trying to make some form of money, generally, and if a documentary is sponsored by any program, then that sponsor has a goal. I think the most famous example of this would be Nanook of the North, which was promoted as a documentary even though it really wasn't, but a big sponsor was a fur company, and you saw a lot of fur in Nanook of the North. So they're thinking, oh, fur is pretty, I want to wear them. That is why the fur company was sponsoring it, because they wanted people to go buy their fur. It wasn't to show that people in the North wore fur. I understand that a documentary needs to be entertaining to at least some audiences and has to meet some economic goals, but I personally think those should not be a documentary's primary focal points, because then I think then the ethics are messed up from the get-go. And if your ethics are messed up from the get-go, then how can you possibly hope to turn out something that you can be morally proud of at the end of the game? It does, of course, also depend on the specific project, because some documentaries are going for more aesthetic experimentation versus the actual just documenting of the experience. But I'd say overall, shaping not good. Documentary filmmakers go out and film events that affect the lives of particular people. So we have to consider if that event is being represented honestly and if it reflects the perceptions of the participants. You also have to think how much ordering in the editing room is necessary to make the event interesting to an audience. Personally, I think golf could use some more editing, because you just watch this event and that's live TV, but still you're watching something and they're just standing there and then they finally swing. So I can see why people think, oh, well, we speed things up, keeps the audience more engaged. However, I understand that golf is a mind game, and if they just swung quickly, you wouldn't understand that tension and the suspense wouldn't be built up. So the event would be altered dramatically from the live viewing to a TV viewing. Let's just take an example that just came to me. So you have to think about if the filmmaker and the editor are betraying the event through the edit. And the edit would be by adding dramatic time versus real time. In real time, you know, you walk around, you get your drink, and then you go. And it's not that exciting to watch. But maybe in dramatic time, you just see someone leave their room. You see them open the fridge, pour the water, drink the water. That's dramatic time to keep things a little more engaged, which is necessary a lot of times, but you have to wonder, is this changing the event? Dramatic time, as mentioned with like the shaping part, I do think that some projects do work with stretching time or condensing time, but those are very aesthetic pieces and very visual heavy. So you have to think about your specific projects. So these are just more like the guidelines, I would say, from what I've been taught and what I personally believe. And then just some final considerations. If someone asks you to turn off the camera, you should do it. I obviously vlog for my other kinds of videos, and if someone tells me they're not comfortable with the camera, I will turn the camera off. Because even though I'm gonna be like, oh, it's my video, or like whatever, I want people around me to feel comfortable, and if they're not feeling comfortable with the invasiveness of the camera, I'm turning it off. Sometimes you'll watch something and someone will say, cut the camera, and sometimes they cut the camera, and sometimes they don't. And maybe they're thinking, well, it's not worth it to cut the camera because this is an impactful moment. Maybe the person's really upset. Maybe they're crying. You don't maybe know. But the camera person's thinking, I can't lose this moment. Versus, I think that person deserves the camera to be turned off for them if they have asked. Personally. Also, don't force your subject into sharing more than they want to. I understand you sometimes have to tease out answers, and I think you can do that to an extent, but if someone's really, really not wanting to talk about this, maybe turn off the camera, talk about the topic with the person off the record, see what they're really comfortable sharing or not, and if they're not comfortable sharing, you may need to either find a new subject or change the tune of your documentary. I don't think it's worth compromising somebody's mental situation. They may not be ready to share something yet. And I think forcing someone to do something early like that is much a despicable act of being a human. Going alongside with that, make sure you set boundaries before you film, and you can always affirm boundaries, change boundaries as you're filming, but have some kind of idea of what your subject is willing to talk about and share, who's willing to be facing the camera, who's willing to be like on camera, but maybe not directly to the camera. Because if you make these boundaries early on, it'll just make the whole process so much easier to deal with, and you don't have to deal with something like, oh, can I use this footage, or what's your comfort zone, or your level, or anything like that. There are so many other considerations, but just to wrap up this video, I want to keep it pretty brief. It's just remember that your subjects deserve dignity. Whether you agree with their opinions, perspectives, or not, they deserve your respect, and if you're making a documentary, you should not just be making this documentary for people to laugh at your subjects. That is horrible, and I personally think that you shouldn't be allowed to make documentaries. Maybe change your tune, decide you want to go into mockumentaries if you want to make more humorous things. But if you're making a documentary and you're trying to show some kind of truth, if you're just making fun of your subjects the whole time, then you're taking advantage of their willingness to let you record their lives, record their thoughts, and come in to their zone. And that wraps up this video. If you learned something, please give it a thumbs up. Comment down below what you think about ethics and privacy concerns when it comes to documentaries, and I will see you next time, so be sure to subscribe because this is Film Friday. Bye!